The agreement tears down major market barriers for U.S. food and agricultural exports. China will now welcome American beef and pork, poultry, seafood, rice, dairy, infant formula, animal feed, biotechnology, and much, much more.
The United States and China sign a trade deal. The U.S. International Trade Commission says dried tart cherries coming from Turkey are not injuring domestic producers. And Michigan Agricultural Commodities Chris Betts will join us with a market update. I'm Janelle Brose, and this is Farm News 5.
Farm News 5 is brought to you by Ford.
China was doing $16 billion with the farmers, and they stopped. Why not? They're in a negotiation. So our people agreed to 20, and I said, no, make it 50. What difference does it make? Make it 50. They say, sir, our farmers can't produce that much. I said, I love our farmers. Let them tell me they can't do it. And I said, tell them to go out and buy a larger tractor, buy a little more land, but they'll be able to do it. I have no doubt they'll be able to do it.
Following 2 years of trade tensions, President Donald Trump signed the first phase of a trade deal with China. The deal calls for cutting or postponing some tariffs in exchange for China purchasing $200 billion worth of American products. 25% of that is expected to go toward the purchase of American agricultural commodities. Upwards of 200 guests, including Michigan Farm Bureau President Carl Bednarski, were in attendance for the signing.
China, the most they imported from the U.S. was $27 billion in 2012. Now we're looking at $40 to $50 billion annually. Another way to put that in perspective, China's total agricultural importation is approximately $125 billion. So with this 40 to 50, we're looking at an excess of a third of what they import totally in agricultural products. It's a huge trade deal. And the thing is, though, it isn't just corn, soybeans, wheat. We're looking at the whole gamut. The number one looks like it's going to be soybeans is the first in benefiting. Also, dairy is going to be a huge benefit out of this trade agreement. But surprisingly, the third is the fruit and vegetables. That was talked about that would be the third largest dollar amount of importations into China. So that goes a long ways when you take a look at Michigan's diverse agriculture, and I believe Michigan is going to benefit tremendously from this trade agreement.
If you want a car from a company that's been building them for 115 years, get a Ford. If you want a car with driver assist technology, get a Ford. You're going to want a Ford.
Dried tart cherry producers in Michigan are shocked after the U.S. International Trade Commission announced dried tart cherries from Turkey are not injuring producers here. The move is an about-face from a U.S. Department of Commerce finding that Turkey was flooding the U.S. market with subsidized dried cherry product that is less than fair value. Had the commission ruled in favor of U.S. producers, a tariff of up to 628.9% would be placed on Turkey's product. The commission will release its report justifying its decision next month. After several committee hearings, the U.S. Senate this week gave the thumbs up to the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA. The trade pact, which passed with support from both sides of the aisle, cleared the U.S. House late last year. President Trump is expected to sign it next week. The lone remaining hurdle is ratification from Canada, which could come later this month.
Start the new decade on solid ground. Foster Swift's Ag Law Group offers comprehensive legal services for producers and agribusinesses. Learn more at fosterswift.com.
Cool, wet weather slowed winter wheat planting this fall, leading to a 7% drop in the seeded area for 2020. The annual winter wheat seedings report was released by USDA's National Ag Statistics Service last week. Executive Director of the Michigan Wheat Program, Jody Pollock-Newsome, says while less than years past, the estimate of 500,000 seeded acres for 2020 is higher than many expected.
So as we looked at those numbers, they were looking again about like that 500,000 acres. And in the conversations with millers and ag business and a lot of those folks, it just feels like that's probably very over-optimistic, because it doesn't seem when you talk to people that most growers really got to plant all the wheat they wanted to plant. I think we could have had a really good year, but with the weather, we did not. And usually we look at about a 10% abandonment. So if USDA is thinking we got 500,000 acres planted, 10% would take us down another 50. That would put us at 450. Depending upon how things look in the spring, we may lose more than 10%, we may not. So I think that number is still really fluid and probably optimistic.
Given the reduced acres planted to winter wheat, many are asking this question: can spring wheat work in Michigan?
It's really a good thing that the Michigan Wheat Program Board funded research probably about 2-3 years ago on spring wheat. We were doing a what if, and one of those what ifs was, what if we had a really bad fall and we couldn't get in the wheat? Can Michigan grow spring wheat? And you know what? Eric Olson, the wheat breeder, he brought in some varieties from the Pacific Northwest and he grew them. And they did okay here. I mean, they're not specifically adapted for here, so they weren't stellar. But if you're a dairy farmer and you're looking for some straw, if you're a grower that has that wheat in that rotation, there may be some opportunities.
To learn more about the opportunities and research, visit miwheat.org. And now with a look at the latest market activity, here is Michigan Ag Commodities' Chris Betts.
Thanks, Janelle. Lots for ag markets to digest over the last couple of weeks, with the January WASDE report released last Friday and the signing of a Phase 1 trade deal with China on Wednesday of this week. The WASDE report was all of a dud without much of an impact on trade, while the Phase 1 deal has been surprisingly bearish. The details of the report are supportive long-term, as China has committed to $80 million worth of ag purchases from January of 2020 through December of 2021. The deal also includes chapters on intellectual property and technology transfer, amongst other areas, as well as enforcement mechanisms. Equities have been firm in response, but ag commodities have been lower in classic buy the rumor, sell the fact fashion. Upside had been priced in the market before the deal was released on Wednesday, and now trade is taking a must-see-it attitude on China's commitments. Traders may also be favoring being long equities versus commodities. In the short term, ag commodities will have to contend with a fast-approaching, potentially record South American crop. For more market information, go to michag.com. With Michigan Agricultural Commodities, I'm Chris Betts.
For more news and video, visit MichiganFarmNews.com and the Michigan Farm Bureau channel on YouTube. With Farm News 5, I'm Janelle Gross. Have a great week of farming.